Hi class. This assignment is about merging colors wet into wet and repeating forms and shapes. I started out by taking a sheet of 9 by 14 paper, and then I gridded it off at 4.5 by 4.5 inches each box, and just drew a light line between each section. Then I used the carbon tracing method on my image that I chose, and I used a bird in this case. And then I decided I was going to repeat it in each of the squares that I drew. And I adjusted each form for perfect placement, so I moved it around a little bit so you could see approximately where I was. When I was drawing, I also put a hinge of masking tape on it, so when I was doing my drawing, the drawing didn't shift around. And then I could lift it off and make sure that my drawing was being reproduced. And now I'm going to demonstrate another bird, so you can see the whole thing here of what I've accomplished so far. I've also made changes in the branches that are coming about, and I'm merging them throughout the painting. So you could do those changes if you want to for this assignment. And here's my bird that I'm going to be working on. Okay, so I'm going to start out with violet this time. I'm using Winsor violet, and my alternate color will be manganese, which are two of my very favorite colors. Manganese is a clear blue, and Winsor violet is an awesome purple. And the first thing I'm going to do before I go any farther is wet the entire image down with clear water. And I'm using a fairly pointed brush. This is the connoisseur brush, Low Cornell 7000 round. And I really want to wet that paper down to soften the sizing. I'm not worried about the drawing that's underneath it. I mean, you don't want to draw super dark underneath it, but that should work pretty well. And then I'm going to let that color soak into the paper until some of the shine has lifted off. Now, I'm going to take my Winsor violet and start off and drop the color into the bird, into the water, and let the water take the paint. And I have a pretty concentrated amount of paint here. So I've decided that his wings will be the blue, and the stomach area or the chest will be the Winsor violet. And let the water take the paint wet into wet. And his tail will also be purple. I have absolutely no recipe for this. I'm making this up as I go. I'm washing out my brush. And now I'm going to go take my manganese blue and make a good concentrate of it. and drop the color onto the bird's head and see what happens. And into the wings. And kind of blending back into the back. And always remember your paint's going to dry lighter. And some more of that concentrated pigment. And so I want a really bright bird, and I want to compensate for that drying issue, drying lighter. And I think that will work out pretty well. But I really won't know until it is absolutely dry. And I probably could add a little bit more color in the chest area of maybe a different shade or different color. And to make this all merge together, I could probably try, I think I'll use a little bit of orange, which is a really hard color to put into purple because it'll usually turn brown. But if I just drop it without any blending, I'll be able to get an interesting accent. And I think that did the trick for me. So I'm going to lift off a little bit of paint by drying my brush on a paper towel. And drying off so you can get a few highlights. And I'm there. So now I'm going to dry it with my hair dryer. 1 second. Okay, now I'm back, and the paper is very dry, and I have lost a little of the strength of the color that I had initially. So I'm going to take another swipe of the purple and make it a little bit darker. It'll depend on the brand of color you're using. And how much water you have in your brush. And I didn't think I had that much, but evidently my paint thought so. So now I've developed that chest area, and I'm going to go ahead and perk up that orange swatch right in the front. And I'm drawing with my brush. And I have it almost looks like a natural light spot here. So I am taking a little bit of clear water, moving my brush around just a little bit. And blotting. Because I think I'm going to do the orange there as well. So this is definitely a made-up bird. Okay, that's looking pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and take my manganese and go through this process one more time, but this time drawing between the lines in a way, enhancing the feathers, getting some definition and drawing some of the little separations. And I'm referring back to my photograph a little bit just to have some reference. You could even print out your photo in black and white if you wanted to have reference. Shadows are important. I'd like to keep the shadows similar in each of the bird paintings that I'm doing here. And I'm going to mix now the manganese and my manganese color and the Winsor Violet together. I'll show you what a beautiful gray that makes. And just depending on how much of each you're using, it could be warm or it could be cool. But I love using those two colors to make grays. And just happens I chose those colors to be the bird itself. So now I can define with that gray. And dry a little bit more line work here. And now I'm going to start on the beak. And I had an override with my colors. It bled into the beak as I was working. And I want to recover that. So again, take a sharp brush, a little bit of clear water, and blot with a clear or a clean paper towel. And I'll also do the same thing with the eye to recover the eye shape. When I'm painting the bird's eye, it's basically a circle, but they all have individual shapes depending on the species of bird you're working on. So just be very careful it doesn't look like a donut. That looks pretty good. I've got a blob on the top, so I'm going to clean that off a little and dry it. 1 second. Okay, I think that's looking pretty good. Next, and make sure that it is very dry in this case, I'm going to take a very small brush. And I'm going to use a bit of yellow, and this is a lemon yellow. And I've used this on the other birds as well for the eye. And this will be the ring around the eye. This is a 0 Cottone brush, and it's really a nice little brush. And I'll put that down on my handout with this video. But it gives me a lot of control and retains a good point. I'm also going to do a little shadow under the bottom of the beak and draw a little bit more. The paper towel is an important part of your painting process because sometimes you need to blot to recover the lights or if you have too much water that pours out of your brush. So it's always there for you to help you develop the control you'll need. I'm kind of recovering the shape that I lost. Okay, that's not too bad. I'll dry a little bit before I go any farther. Next, I'm going to do a little redrawing because I think I lost my way a little bit. So I just want to recover my drawing ever so slightly, and remember that there's a little bit of anatomy involved, though I'm not getting really into that for this particular painting. There's some shadow, and you could draw right on top of the watercolor. And probably the hardest part is the pupil of the eye. I'm going to use Payne's Gray. I find it the Winsor & Newton Payne's Gray is the most useful for me. It has a good neutral color, a little bit on the bluish side. But other brands can run warm or cool, so if you're going to buy a Payne's Gray, get the Winsor & Newton. Cottonman's not terribly bad either. And I'm going to leave a little hole there for it's not there's a little spark or accent on the eye. Now I'm taking some of, you probably you can't see this, but I'm using a little bit of the Winsor & Newton Payne's Gray to create a little shadow. I've picked up a tiny bit of violet to make the contour of the beak. More of that gray. And you're always drawing with the brush. The brush is no more than an extension of your arm. And I am using that really fine brush. I enjoy realism, and in the past few years, realism has taken a back seat to abstract painting. But I don't think it's any less a painting style. It's just not, it's actually a lot harder. I'm working a little wet into wet here, developing that dark patch on the beak, redrawing a little bit, and so on. And I'll go ahead and detail this up a little bit more on my own, and I'll show you when it's finished. But the last thing I'd like you to see is doing the legs or feet. So I'm going to return to my number 6 low Cornell brush. And I'm going to start out with a little bit of warm. And I think I'll use the orange that I had before on my palette and mix it with maybe some yellow ochre. So I've got a warm, peachy looking color. And I'm just putting a blob on where the legs are. After that dries, I'll go ahead and put in some feathers across the top and then work in the shadows. the direction of the light is really important. And I would say that this particular bird, the direction of the light is coming from the right side. So I'll be shadowing accordingly throughout. Okay, I'll get started on finishing this up and I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, I'm back on my bird again, and I felt that I had lost some of the continuity between the four birds that are on the page. I should have thought that I had two birds side by side that are blue, but didn't think about it, so oh well. I decided to change the orange patch to more yellow. So what I did was I tried lifting out a little bit, and then I went over it with a yellow Super Color Soft Cottone-Kolthoff watercolor pencil. And I love these pencils, and they cover watercolor beautifully. And they're really great for detail. So that gave me a nice spark that blends the lower bird and the upper bird nicely. I also went ahead and put some of that color along the eye and used my blue Cottone-Kolthoff pencil to spark up the wings just a little bit. And it's just it's like a colored pencil, but it's water soluble, so you can blend it in with a little bit of water. And the white is really good for accents. So I'll put it on pause for a little bit, and then I will be back. As I worked, I decided I would add a little bit of pink colored pencil, watercolor pencil, to the chest area, so I had cohesion with the bird that was underneath, as you can see over here. So now the three birds are starting to relate a little bit better. And now I'm going to start the feet. Oh, one thing I also wanted to mention is that I added a shadow under the chest with a little bit of Payne's Gray or ultramarine blue, either way. So I have more of a light source here on the top than, and you can see there's a consistency between the birds. And that has to also relate down to the feet, so you have the light source as well on the legs. So the shadow will probably be over here. And he's on a branch. I'm going to move up to a bigger brush. And I'm going to take some of the colors off my palette and blend them together, and that's probably best known as mud. And mud is really related to every individual painting. Every painting blends together to make its own mud. So I've got those shadows there, and I'm going to put a little bit of like an orangey light or a peachy color on the top of the legs. And lastly, the branch. And I'll do more to it, and I know it's difficult watching a long video, so I'm going to try to make this a little bit shorter. But I'm taking a warm brown, and this is burnt sienna, and a little of the gray that's on my palette. And the light source again is still the light's coming from this side and darker on the opposite side. So that relates back to the branch. My first feeling, I was doing this just now and I thought, oh, I probably darkened it up too much, but then again, remember it's going to dry lighter, so I have to keep reminding myself that. A little dry brush in there. And you can accent it, darken it, and lighten it as you need to, but I think I've done pretty well with this bird. And there's a branch that also extends across the painting. So it really, you can see it in the photograph. So I'll darken the bottom of that. And then I can recover the lights on the legs a little bit more as I want to. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the background quite yet. And I think I'm going to go with different colors in the background. So when I get there, I'll photograph it. All right, have fun with yours.